This is the Gospel Revolution.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy.
Here's the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, Michael Lilborn Williams.
Thank you for that wonderful greeting, Daniel Thomas Rouse. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful, and I'm feeling thankful. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving to you, Michael, and all of our listeners across the world.
Well, you know, I normally have a good Thanksgiving, but Ethan Massengill ruined it for me.
Oh, come on, Ethan.
Oh, he did. I'm telling you, he had ruined a 2-car funeral. Ethan got in contact with me recently, and we're in contact most days, except the days that he has work days now. I don't like it when the people that I talk to get jobs because I can't talk to them.
And just so you know, I don't like it either. But
yeah, I know. Yeah. You know, I've been praying that Daniel would be jobless and homeless just so that we can talk more. Even if I thought that worked, I wouldn't have done that. So he got on. I think Lisa McPeak was a part of this plot too, to ruin Thanksgiving for everybody. So they started figuring out this. So they went into Thanksgiving, and there's a Thanksgiving offering, right?
Mm.
So they went back to scratch and started all over again. I know Ethan did. I know that Lisa had some involvement in it, I think. And they took the verse that about the thanksgiving of many redounding to the glory of God.
Mm.
And they say, of course, I remember teaching on that. And I did an entire series called Thankfulness, the Wine of Life.
Ooh.
Oh, you talk about a series. Oh, my gosh. It sold by the thousands. I made more than thousands.
Mm.
And so I said giving thanks, part of it was that giving thanks is like picking grapes and sending them up to God.
Wow.
And then he makes wine out of them and pours it back on you.
Ooh.
So Thanksgiving, the wine of life. Thanksgiving is what you offer to God. That's the grapes. And he pours down the wine of life upon you.
Wow,
man! I feel just I'm ready.
That'll preach, brother. It did preach.
It did well, and I could do it again today, and hopefully our GRs would laugh me out of the room. But isn't it amazing that the greatest respect as you share the gospel is that people laugh at you for saying things now? That's their highest form of respect.
Yes.
But they found out that this whole Thanksgiving thing, it's not a when you give thanks. It is I've not gone through it. It's very exciting, but it's about the results of the thanks offering, which, of course, Jesus fulfilled, and it resulted in the glory of God.
Wow.
Ethan shows how this was sharing with me how that this was all fulfilled at the cross.
Mm.
This is not a good preaching on Thanksgiving. So,
yeah, Michael, I remember one thing that you said that really rang true to me as I was still a Word of Faith pastor and discovering that all of my works and my prayer life and all of that was really, it wasn't helping me in a relationship with God in any sense.
Mm.
And I had a question to myself, and I thought, well, what's left for me to do? What's left for me on any of this? And I remember you in one of the series, it might have been up in Canada sometimes, as you said something about all we have left is to say thank you. And
Yeah.
And I think that still rings true today to me.
It does.
I have nothing left to offer God or anything like that to improve my status, but I sure am thankful.
Yeah, and it's not like that the thankfulness fulfills something and then God does something for you, that part.
He's not pouring out the wine. Is that what you're saying?
No, exactly. It'd probably box mine in my future. The reality of those things, and many of us have stopped along the way and looked and felt the loss of the things that we've left behind. There has been a feeling of loss. But the one thing no one's had a feeling of loss in is their awareness of Christ in them. Even though most of our guys don't pray at all, we've never encouraged anybody not to pray.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pray. I mean, I'm just have to be upfront with you. I don't pray, but I don't experience guilt either, and I don't experience worry. A whole lot of things that I just don't experience anymore. Along with that, when prayer many times was to get rid of my guilt and my worry.
Yeah.
And now I don't do that, and I don't have the things that were supposed to be alleviated by prayer. And my quality of life, my income, my stability, financial stability, my health, I would have to say that I enjoy a relatively stable life, with health. And, I've got my old man issues that I deal with, but, I still get to go to the gym. I can still do lunges, and there's not a whole lot of 72-year-old men doing weighted 60 full stride lunges. So I don't have anything to complain about. And of course, I remember the threats back then. Oh, but you just wait, Mike Williams. Well, gosh, now I've waited so long, you can't blame anything on much anything else except age now. So, but we do miss there's things that we've had to awaken to the fact that we really miss nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We have all of that. And then these understandings of the gospel, there's the consistent thing. And I tell you, this is a very real one, is that we developed a community around those beliefs. And we enjoyed that community. Now, that community also caused us grief.
Right.
Because you might get kicked out. Your acceptance was based on this and that, and who believed what and who agreed on what and didn't agree on what. But everybody getting together and us all standing there and singing these songs together. But, I don't see any difference between that and the football game or, the Kiwanis Club or any of those things. And obviously there's some Christian groups that are much more enthusiastic, and, there's better people who can whip up a crowd better than others can.
Yeah.
And take you through everybody got healed, yet everybody went out in the same wheelchair they come in, but we still are convinced everybody got healed in the service. But people miss that, Daniel. They miss that coming together. So we're really encouraging you that we really have only one way to come together with you. And that is here with what you're doing right now. And we really encourage that.
So gather around, folks. We're here today, and we have been, my goodness, Michael, I sound like a broken record, because every time I go to edit, I think about every time I open up the teaching portion of the podcast, I say the same thing. But I'm just dumbfounded by where we are in understanding the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And 2 weeks ago, Michael, you started talking about how you have learned to navigate through life, starting with knowing who you are.
Yeah.
But the second part of that is knowing where you are. And that story you told about sitting in your friend's living room and navigating to even the front door, such a powerful image, because that's where we are when we stand in biblical prophecy.
Yeah.
Is if you are standing in the wrong place, then you're going to put the prophecies in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I hope that episode we did a couple weeks ago about the time frame of all of these prophecies get you to stand in the right place. And what place is that? In the place of fulfilled prophecy.
Yeah.
And specifically, we've been nailing down the 70 weeks of Daniel and the 1,000-year reign of Christ, because the 70 weeks of Daniel is within the 1,000-year reign of Christ.
Yes.
And understanding that from a fulfilled perspective, and specifically fulfilled at the cross, because there are those who see it fulfilled, but fulfilled 40 years after the cross, a generation after the cross. I think the majority of Christianity sees it as a future fulfillment. But Michael, that position, I think, is really powerful. Last week, we looked at specifically from that position, how do we see this character that Christianity has made up?
Yeah.
Titled the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And we started looking at that. But we got to look at it from that position of a fulfilled prophecy. So any of these prophecies that Christianity takes and paints over the description with the term Antichrist, which is only used by one writer in the Bible, only 4 times or 3 times in 1 John and 1 time in 2 John. It's the only writer of the Bible, the Elder John, wrote about these things, and they have absolutely nothing to do with a single world dictator, ruler, Antichrist figure that Christianity has painted.
All of them being found in prophetic statements that came from the process of the 1,000-year reign from David to the cross, and also from David. And I mean, from Daniel. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because a lot of people see these things as separate from, so we've got the 1,000-year reign, and now let's go over here and study the 70 weeks of Daniel. You've got to understand the 70 weeks of Daniel prophecy came out in the last 490 years of the 1,000-year reign.
Yeah, right.
So it's almost like all right, if you don't get that, maybe you'll get this. We'll put 2 major prophecies together, have them all culminate on the same day.
Come on.
And maybe you won't miss it. And in fact, we've got it all the way up just so that you get how powerfully that the Christ is going to absorb all judgment. Let us tell you about the judgment. No flesh shall be saved.
Come on.
Not a thing. You think it's just for Israel? Honey, read those prophecies.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely, judgment was coming. It was coming to consume and to devour the entire world. Every living, breathing human being was going to, run to the rocks. Men will cry out to die and won't be able to die. A moratorium on death, and so that only suffering could be realized. And oh my God! And then we've got the 1,000-year reign that takes us all the way to the resurrection and the defeat of death. And then we have the 70 weeks of Daniel, which coincide within that framework to let us know that a judgment had been prescribed and prophesied, that the judgment of the entire world was about to happen. And we were told exactly which 3.5 years it was going to happen in. And it was to happen in the second half of 7 years of tribulation, the last 3.5 being great tribulation, in which no flesh was going to be saved. And but then we start getting this, wait a minute, we're going to have to land the plane. Hold on, something's happened. We interrupt this broadcast for this special announcement, and that whole thing was interrupted. And it is declared to have been interrupted by the prophet Daniel himself. It was declared that it was going to be interrupted in Matthew 24 by Christ himself. It was declared to have been interrupted in the book of Romans, chapter 9, by Paul himself. And we can tell you unequivocally that no other writer in the New Testament agreed with Daniel and with Jesus about the cutting off of this last 3.5 years. None of them agreed with the reality of the kingdom was a spiritual kingdom, which was totally manifested at the death, when death was ended, the death of righteousness. Righteousness can't die anymore. That's the only thing we can tell you about it is, well, what death's still here, the body's still dying. Let me tell you what ain't dying. Righteousness ain't dying no more. And I just put all the Tennessee in there I could. All right, so we don't have any of that that's happening. So all of our friends, now here's just the bloody facts of it all, and that is that if you are premillennial, you have no clue what Christ did on the cross. If you are postmillennial, that's one millennial means 1,000 years. You have no clue what the cross accomplished. If you are amillennial, because it was obvious you have to move this 1,000 years around everywhere because it doesn't fit anything, hats off to you for the little shuck and jive you do there with amillennial. But our preterist friends, we're going to finally put, folks, if you want to remain a preterist in your views, but I will tell you, as much as I care about you, some of you guys I absolutely think are fantastic. But I'm telling you, you are dishonoring the work of the cross by sticking to your preterist views. You've, number one, you have gone outside the 1,000-year reign of Christ. You were amillennial for a period of time. Mm-hmm. You were premillennial for a period of time. And now you're postmillennial. I mean, it's like, it's hard even to fathom. You also, here's the whole crux of the idea. Daniel, what is so wonderfully and mercifully real is that Jesus said, now is the 3.5-year judgment of the world. Because that's what this prophecy was about this judgment that was coming.
Yeah.
And it was 3.5 years. And Jesus said right at the point, the moment that this 3.5 years was to begin, at the end of his ministry, and his death, and the culmination of his crucifixion. And Jesus announced there's more to this crucifixion than you know, which they didn't know anything about it, actually.
Yeah.
But he was explaining, so this is what all the cross is going to do. The cross is going to fulfill Daniel 9:24. Would you read that for us, Daniel?
Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgressions, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy.
Well, okay, so we've got a mouthful there. And I remember, and I've always told you guys, I've walked into this understanding backward in the back door with a blindfold on. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading Daniel 9:24. And when I got the concept of what was being said in the book of Hebrews about sin, and this I will always give credit to the book of Hebrews for, that the blood of goats lasted for a year. They had no conscience of sins for 1 year, the whole nation.
Wow.
Because of the sacrifice of one goat. By a ceremonially cleansed and prepared high priest on a ceremonially blemish-free sacrifice. And because of that, they went around for 1 year not even thinking about sin.
I can't even imagine that. I mean, coming from a Christian mindset, I can't even imagine having
a whole year
of not being conscious of sin. Wow.
Yeah. And that blew me away, as it should blow anybody away.
Yeah.
And then the very same writer in Hebrews saying, how much more the blood of Christ?
Ooh.
It's like, much more? What are you talking about? I would have taken a 10-minute break.
Come on.
From being sin conscious.
Yes, sir.
Now, you think that this did not alter world history. Now, let me tell you what has formed the history of this world to this point. Please hear me clearly. The thing that has formed world history to this point is misperceptions about the 1,000-year reign and the 70 weeks of Daniel.
Mm.
I just watched another show last night. I like all of these things that show me my ancestors and how stupid they were. Whether it was from Scotland, the line of kings of the Stuarts. My family is as out of that line. My family tree is out of the Capetian dynasty of 300 years of kings and queens. I've got Queen Anne, a photo of her statue. She was like my 36th great grandmother, and she was the first queen in Europe. And her descendants then became 300 years of kings in Europe or in France.
Mm.
And I could take you all over the place, and how we got thrown into Pocahontas, how we got the whole lineage got thrown into Chief John Ross, my second great grandfather. It's like, this is freaky. But the issue is all of this ancestry that leads up to me. And there's many of you that have this ancestry. You just don't know it, because we all came out pretty much the same cesspool if you came out of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, but the understanding as I watched these shows about who's the anointed and who's got the rightful Christ, in the name of Christ, and they're crossing themselves, and the battle between the Protestants and the Catholics, and King Henry switching from one religion to the other, and both of them massacring everybody on the other side. And you're trying to find something good about this book. Just because it became civilized does not mean it became correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we see history. History is filled with agony. It is filled with the misperception and the misunderstanding of the 1,000-year reign. Everybody was trying to find this place where reigning is taking place. So we've got kings and queens, and it was who married who, and all of this. And it was a cesspool of marriage. I mean, goodness, the Russian royalty married into the English royalty, that married into the Italian royalty, that are married into the Scottish royalty, and on and on and on and on. And I sometimes am very thankful that I can walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's see, is that right? Walk and forget it. I can't figure it out. So if we are going to prevent history from repeating itself, we must find out what caused them to live that history, and we must deliberately change that place from which we are coming, know where we are as opposed to where they thought they were. Mm. They were coming from a place that they did not know where they were.
Right.
The only way that we are going to see a different future, and I'm convinced we are going to, folks, whether this happens, 50 years, 2,500, 1,000 years after I'm gone, Daniel's gone, we're all gone, we must commit ourselves to leaving a view of the work of the cross that defies every form of Christianity, that shows everything being completely fulfilled. For what purpose? Number one, people need to know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But the other issue is people need to know where the hell they are.
Yeah.
You're not in some process of this prophecy. You're not on the receiving end of a chosen one. You're not the next one in line. You're not defending the next one in line. You're not defending the next person who's supposed to be the king and laying down your life to do so. And thinking you're obtaining value and credence to your life because you laid down your life to get the next king anointed.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a lie, folks. And you must, the whole world, we are trying to give you not a new religion. What we are doing by teaching on these finished prophecies, what we are doing is showing you, number one, who you are. You are God in the earth. Number two, where are you? You are on the other end of all fulfilled prophecy. And you must plot and plan and design a future that includes peace and joy for you and for the entire human race. And it can come from just one. I was looking at that. You think just one can't change things? Jeez. You don't even live in America.
What?
You don't live in America.
Where do I? I don't know what to do with that information.
I know. Yeah. It's like, what do we do with that information? Michael has officially lost his mind. And we know now that 72 is the age where your brain dismisses itself. Do you know that the term America comes from a man called Americo, and he was an Italian man. I had his last name here, and I don't have it with me. But his last name, his first name was Americo. And in 1499, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In 1499, Americo came here to look and see what's here. And he did a report on the vegetation, the people that were here, the animal life, all of those things. And he sailed back years later, and he was a cartographer. So he published all this stuff and drew some, land masses and stuff. And he was letting everybody know that Christopher Columbus did not discover Asia. That this was not Asia. Do you know that all that time they still thought it was Asia?
Wow.
And so this got spread around all over Europe until this very famous person who was very well known for drawing maps and, doing land masses and describing the world and the known world, at least to people. He drew another map, and this was the first one attempted of a world map. Now, what he had heard was this man Americo was going around passing out this information. And so he mistakenly identified Americo as the person who discovered this land he was describing.
Wow.
So when this new world map was drawn up for people, more accurate than the one before, then they placed Asia in Asia, and this land where it is, he wrote across, he said, okay, so the man's name that discovered this was Americo, so we'll call it America.
Wow.
And no, so we're just wanting you to know that information, you may not know where you are. you may not know where you are.
Mm.
If there would have been an accurate if Columbus, and people just question whether Columbus was the first or not. But if he had been, we should be living in Colombia, not America.
Mm.
Now, he did get one country named after him, Colombia. But and some people didn't even know that was named after Christopher Columbus. All right. So I know I went down that rabbit trail with you, but you've got to understand that you've got to look at history and see why we are where we are and who we think we are. And, well, now, Mike, you're going to start advocating that we change all of our songs. Columbia, Columbia. No, not going to do that. Oh, we've got what we've got, and we are what we are, and we accept the mistakes. But you must accept that this America as a name is a mistaken identity. Doesn't change anything. It's vitally important to know who you are and where you are. All right. So if you have developed any doctrine of Christianity, you're who you are, number one. If you think sin exists, if you think that any part of Daniel 9:24 is unfulfilled, you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are if you do not. Now we've got 20 sessions now, I guess, close to of the 1,000-year reign. And after that, you ought to know what Daniel 9:24 is the totality of. So you've got to know who you are, and you've got to know where you are. Folks, bloodiest of wars have been fought because people didn't know where they were in this time frame. And this time frame was arranged so that we would study war no more. It wasn't so that war would break out worse than it's ever been before, but it was that we would study war no more. If we knew who we were and where we were, we would study war no more. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
If we knew who we were and therefore identifying everybody else on the planet, and if we knew where we were and thus placing all of us outside of a futuristic prophecy to gain some winnable territory or land or whatever, we would certainly be studying war no more. But all of this, God, folks, this is so important. Let me tell you something I don't like about myself. This information is so absolutely vital that I don't like me in that I am not a good orator. Man, I hear people who espouse the craziest things on earth, but because they speak well, people listen to them. We have the greatest message in the world, and I am not a good orator. I just, maybe I need to go to Dale Carnegie or something. I don't know. I think it's too late. But I would love to be able to do this better than what I do. But you guys are going to have to listen and listen carefully, and then you expound on it. You do research into it. We've got gospel revolutionaries that have let us know they don't do that, and they're not going to do that. They trust us. We appreciate the trust. We think it is warranted. We think that trust is warranted. But you've got to understand, I don't do this to the perfection that it warrants. And I already know that Daniel would say the same thing about himself.
Absolutely.
Even though Daniel is Daniel, he's a smooth talker now. But no matter how smooth, no matter how good of orators we are, no matter how eloquent, if one of our speeches made it in the Library of Congress because of how well it was put together, it would never match the information and the value of it that we are espousing.
Yeah, never. So the Antichrist. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh.
So, Michael, just for review's sake, to get us caught up to where we were and to where we're going, we talked about the 8-legged table of the Antichrist. So there's 8 figures of descriptive that Christianity and preterists point to being a individual person. Generally speaking, there are some who see them as a group. But to review this, we looked at all the uses of the word Antichrist.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, those are all found in the Elder John, 1 John, 2 John. And none of them are used of a single person. They all refer to a group of people who deny that Jesus came in the flesh. And the only reason that gets tied into any kind of end time teaching is because John says we're in the end times. And in the end times, these antichrists will arise. Well, the elder John didn't know where he was. He
did not.
Even though he was alive during the death, burial, and resurrection of the Christ, he did not know where he was. So he saw this time that he was living as the end times. He was waiting for the end yet.
Yep.
That's the table. And I mean, the table's non-existent as far as we look at the term Antichrist. But what we did is we found a list of 8 different names that Christianity associates with this term Antichrist. So we already know the word Antichrist is not the proper term. But is there an individual person? Is there a dictator that's coming that is going to do all that Christianity says that he's going to bring in all these end time stuff and have a part to play in the tribulation and all that? So let me give you these 8 terms. We've gone through a few of them. We'll start in the New Testament. We have the man of sin, the man of lawlessness, the son of perdition. These are all one. These are used in different, depending on your translation and different things. So we have the man of sin. We have the beast in Revelation chapter 13. We have the false prophet, again, in Revelation 13. We have the abomination of desolation, mentioned in Daniel as well as Matthew 24. Last week, we looked at the little horn out of Daniel 7 and 8. And if we go to the Hebrew scriptures, we have the little horn, the prince who is to come, out of Daniel chapter 9. And there are 2 more, the king of the north and the worthless shepherd out of Zechariah 11. These, Michael, are the 8 typical figures, typical references that people use to identify in Christianity and Preterism as well about some sort of figure, a person that's going to hold this position that they call the Antichrist.
Daniel, it's unbelievable the lengths that people have gone through to be able to identify a non-existent person. Number one, as you said, the only place the term Antichrist shows up, and I did this again just yesterday evening. It's like I gotta know that I know what I already know, because what we're saying is so different. And so I asked my Chat GPT that within the confines of the books of 1st and 2nd John, is the Antichrist ever referred to as a single individual? No was the first word. And then, I mean, Chat GPT sometime will take you the long way around to an answer.
Mm-hmm.
But when it knows the answer, it knows the answer. And it just said, no, there is no individual. And then it breaks all of that down and says, because John says this and about that they are already here. It pointed out the times that he identified this Antichrist as not even being a person; it's a spirit of, and but never is it a single human being. How did this human being of a futuristic prophecy get built? This is a built person, that never existed, except in the minds of Christians. And I might say, goodness gracious, Islam has picked up on it. There's religions around the world. It's like, oh, Antichrist? Yeah, okay. Well, we can jump onto that. There's going to be whoever fights against us is the Antichrist.
Yeah, right.
Why are we looking at these 8 things? Because these 8 figures described, and these are 8 persons. As best, every one of them we've gone through so far is a person. But these 8 persons give the physical body to a non-existent person called the Antichrist. So now, and this is one where that our last one that we went into is this little horn. Well, I never dreamed I even wanted to talk about a damn little horn. But this is for our preterist friends. We have gone into this for you, with you, and you, our dear friends. You guys have this, at least one of them that you turn to, Antiochus. You have given a breath to a non-existent character through this. So through this person, in this historical figure that is historical, and that this Antichrist thing was fulfilled. But see, you're still even trying to fill in something that didn't need filled in to support a doctrine of 70 AD. You've got to accept, put your numbers, people together, get your calculator out, and do both of these prophecies. You'll see that 70 weeks of Daniel come up to the crucifixion of Christ, with 3.5 years being left over. And you'll see the 1,000-year reign very specifically ending in the destruction of death. Now, those of you that don't believe death has been destroyed, that this is irrelevant to you, but Paul taught that death was destroyed in the work of the cross. So what you guys have done in a very noble thing is wanting to end this mess of fighting about the fulfillment of these things and futuristic events. You did a good job, but you took a step in the right direction, but you stopped because you accepted that these prophecies, we're going to go over one of them today, that you also place this person as a fulfillment of these things that has caused you to stretch the fulfillment of the cross out to 70 AD. We are telling you that by any stretch of the imagination, that the temple and its sacrifices, as described in Daniel at this moment, the sacrifice, the importance of the sacrifice would cease. You are telling us, though, that those sacrifices were still in effect until the temple was destroyed. You're saying that the work of the cross was unimportant, that it did not. Well, no, we're just saying historically. Folks, we are telling you historically that the end of all of the temple age ended with the death of Christ. It didn't end if the temple was still there. It would have no consequence upon the fulfillment of the work of the cross.
So you're saying if the temple was still there and they were still making sacrifices and offerings, that still doesn't take away from what Daniel chapter 9 is saying, is that these things ended at the cross.
Well, it says that Jesus was the final sacrifice. I mean, there's no other priest once he became the great high priest. So none of this is acknowledged by God. So why is it being acknowledged by you?
Yeah.
I mean, why acknowledge something that God himself says? God himself says that this all ended at the cross, and then you're taking it out to 70 AD. Now, honestly, I sat down with a group of 8 of you guys in Canada, and we had an open discussion, and all 8 preterists changed their minds when we had a chance to talk about this openly. And these were dear friends of mine that had heard the gospel. They had been captured by the preterist doctrine. And then they actually asked to talk to me because they felt that they had something to teach. And let me tell you, this is years ago before I knew all the ins and outs of this. But we sat and we talked, and every one of them openly and acknowledged that they had changed their minds, that they saw that this was not possible, and that it was taking away from the work of the cross. So the one time I had to sit down with 8 preterists in their home, and it was just me and 8 of them, but they had all learned the gospel from me. So number one, I had the advantage that they had great respect for me because I had taught them the gospel in the first place. But then they'd heard this because this teaching has been around longer than we've been around, for sure. But in that discussion, which was an open discussion, open question, nobody got angry, nobody got hostile, nobody got on edge. We compared information, and they said, we see where that we're wrong. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, this time frame is so important, especially when you're reading out of the time frame. For example, when you're looking at these figures out of this vision that Daniel had, this is all tied in with the 70 weeks of Daniel.
Yeah.
And this little horn was part of that prophecy in Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8. And Michael, just got me all excited, and it put the nail in the coffin for me, is this thing that's stated in Daniel 7:9. I watched till these thrones were put into place. So, and he just got done talking about the beast and the 10 horns and this little horn and all of this.
And all of these were things that were taking place during the 1,000-year reign.
Yes. So I watched till these thrones were put into place. So we know they were positions of power. They were kings. They were rulers of some sort.
They're listed.
And the Ancient of Days was seated. And that's the whole crux of which we're working from in understanding the 1,000-year reign of Christ, is that Christ was seated at the right hand of God till all of his enemies are made his footstool. Yeah. And so all of these thrones, Daniel watched each throne put into place, predestined by God to be there for the specific time. And what time was that? It was the time that the Ancient of Days was seated in this 1,000-year reign of Christ. The Daniel's prophecy being the last 490 years, save 3.5 years of this prophecy of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. But no matter who you look at, no matter how you want to define the beast, no matter how you want to define the horns, the big horn, the little horns, and all of these, they have to be thrones that were put into place by God during the 1,000-year reign of Christ.
Well, and, just as much as understanding the 1,000-year reign of Christ up to this point is also to understand that this seated at the right hand of God thing is no longer in effect now.
Right, exactly.
That's what promotes religion on this side of the cross. It is failing to see the 1,000-year reign fulfilled But because of writers and like in Hebrews and Peter and James and John, they still have that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Well, you've got to look at what Paul had to say and what Jesus had to say. Jesus prayed, remember, right before the end of the 1,000-year reign, as he was going to the cross, he said, Father, I pray that they might be one in us as we are one, and you in me, and I in them, and they in us. Now, Paul makes that same statement in so many words, that is the result of the work of the cross. Now, you show me somebody sitting at somebody's right hand, because if Christ is seated at the right hand, you're at the right hand. The problem is, if you're at the right hand, you're not one with the Father.
Yeah.
So after the transition, after the cross, because we missed what the cross did, we then place Jesus at the right hand, and he's there to take care of all of our sins. He's there to, God, you've taught on this so much. He's there at the right hand to hear your confessions. He's there at the right hand to tell the Father just how sick you really are. And, Daddy, they really need help. Daddy, I'm telling you, I know you're a rough one to get along with sometime, but Father, I intercede on their behalf that you will do this and that for them. And folks, it is all a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it is not a lie, we should have been struck dead years ago.
Yeah.
If what you have said about these things is true, we shouldn't have a healthy bone in our body.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't have a dime in our bank account. We shouldn't have an ounce of peace in our minds. We should have absolutely nothing going right according to your doctrine.
And you should have everything going right for you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, sir. And you don't. You don't. In fact, when it comes to worry and guilt and grief and sin, I'll guarantee you we've got it heads and heads above what all of you guys who consider that Jesus is at the right hand of the Father right now. You guys carry more worry in you than I do. I'll promise you do. And how do I know you worry? Because you call the prayer chain. I just call it the worry chain. I hear it in your voices. God Almighty, you put up YouTube posts telling people, we just got this bad news. Please pray. Please pray. Now, I understand. I'm a compassionate man, but there's such a thing as having compassion. But according to what you teach, you're not supposed to be worrying. And if I tell you that you're not supposed to worry, you will agree. But then you know what you do? You go right back to worrying again. You know why? Because you can't stop. You know why you can't stop? Because you don't know who you are and you don't know where you are. If you knew who you were and where you were, you would stop worrying about the future. You would stop. Oh, why should anyone take thought for the morrow? For the morrow shall take care of itself. I've preached it. Daniel's preached it. Every preacher has preached it. And then we've gone and grieved and worried with you. Folks, all we're doing is stating the obvious contradictions here that you aspire to, but don't live by. You aspire to, and there's not a one of you that live by those who aspire to these doctrines. I've got family members that are so deeply involved in their Baptist church. I'm telling you, they're there Sunday morning, Sunday night. They give 10% of everything that comes in that house. They are there for every special meeting. They are there for every time the door opens. Their family is in the praise team. Our boys operate in this on stage all the time. And they will not date any girl that is not a Christian and does not go to church. And that all of this is in place, and their sons are in their 20s now. But I do not know of a single human being that I have not heard more things come out of her mouth than this statement. I am so worried about.
Mm.
I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, you hear somebody that is that involved in church and made sure that her family is there, her husband is there, he plays. They're all involved in the church, and yet the number one thing that she is absolutely open about is that she is about to be broken into by stress and worry.
Mm.
Now, what's wrong with that wonderful family member of mine? She is she a bad person? No, she doesn't know who she is, and she does not know where she is. She thinks she's in church. She doesn't know she is the church.
That's so good. Mm-mm-mm. So we looked at 3 of these legs so far, Michael. The man of sin, we described that as being Jesus. The man who knew no sin became sin, that we might become the righteousness of God.
Seems quite clear.
Jesus identified himself as the abomination of desolation very clearly in Matthew 24, that you would see him standing in the holy place, not in the temple, but in the very place where he delivered this message on the Mount of Olives. He stood there telling them, but they were so blinded and blinded on purpose, predestined to be blinded, that they didn't even see what he was talking about. So that's also goes back to Daniel 9 about this Messiah that would have this the abomination of the desolation of this prophecy here in Daniel 9, which is totally Christ. And then last week we looked at the little horn, and as I just read out of Daniel 7, is we know it cannot be Antichrist, as preterist viewpoint is, and we know it cannot be a future Antichrist because it's within the time frame of Daniel's prophecy. And we gave you a couple things to think about, such as the 2 Herods in Jesus's story. The Herod who killed all the babies when Jesus was born, when the angel came to Joseph and told him and Mary to take Jesus and go to Egypt, get out of there while this great slaughter was happening. And then that Herod died, but his son took in his place. And that is the Herod that rose up. And we thought that perhaps that could be that little horn that grew in the place of this other big horn, Herod the Great. And that would be Herod's son.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the point is it's not futuristic, and it's not anybody past the cross.
Yeah, because of the events that are spoken of after the little horn.
Mm-hmm.
There is a documentation of what happens after the little horn, and that documentation is the cross. That's what comes after the little horn.
So, Michael, those are 3 legs to the table. So our table that we know we don't even have a tabletop anymore, but the table nonetheless is quite wobbly. Let's look at another one here, and that is the Prince who is to come.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Michael, we did some research on this to see which people and which groups of people identify this Prince who is to come and who they say he is.
Mm-hmm.
A couple names that will be familiar with you. Now, the Prince who is to come is found in Daniel 9:26. We'll go to that in a minute. But John Nelson Darby, he places the Prince as the Antichrist. A prince who is to come is a future Antichrist that is yet to come. Same with C.I. Schofield, Hal Lindsey, Tim LaHaye, John F. Woolvard, Chuck Missler, David Jeremiah. These are just some people that have peddled this, and this is a common understanding. The other one, and we were talking about with the little horn, the preterists also have a view of this. And they see this person as a man by the name of Titus, who was a Roman Empire. And he was responsible for coming in and bringing his armies in and destroying the physical city of Jerusalem, including the temple. So these guys, Eusebius Caesarea, an early church historian, identified the prince with the Roman general Titus, who led the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And Michael, that view is echoed by Matthew Henry, Albert Barnes, Adam Clark, John Gill, and many preterist scholars who see this. If it's not Titus, they see it as some form of the Roman government. So you have the two kind of main perspectives of this is that this prince who is to come is either this future Antichrist figure that Christianity has manufactured and created, or it was a historical person who was a part of the Roman Empire in AD 70. Again, let's look at the time frame. It's post-cross. It's post-1,000-year reign. It's post 70 weeks of Daniel.
Well, and so what this boils down to now, we've shown you that a lot of people that have been trusted for a whole lot of things, and we've been through a lot of end time events with a lot of these authors. They have led us up to the brink, and then you would think that they would get the hint that since their prophecies about judgment have not come, that maybe that prophecy of judgment of the whole world never came and never will came because Jesus cut it short in righteousness.
Yep.
Why not? Why not give Jesus the credit?
Come on.
You know, that's why these people go around. Well, I just give Jesus all the credit. Why? Because you've got it, so you got to give it to him. If you preach the gospel, you don't have to give Jesus the credit.
Yeah,
because you don't get any in the first place to be giving back to him. You saw all these ministries. Now we can show you that all of these stand in one of these positions, either post-millennial, pre-millennial. I'm not sure if there's one in there that is amillennial, but we do know that there is the preterist who all call this some historical figure. Now, they and like the little horn, I mean, goodness gracious, that was a historical figure, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So, and how did we find out it was a historical figure?
Because of the time frame.
The time frame we read in context. We saw that the little horn. My goodness, Daniel and I both was surprised. I mean, knucklehead, that we did not realize that Herod, who died soon after Jesus was born, was not the Herod who judged Jesus.
You're going to tell everyone that we missed that again?
No, I'm going to blame it all on you. Yeah, some things we need to just move on from. But folks, this and that case in point, that shows you when you are not taught, you don't know. And when information is so incorrect that you don't even know to look for correct information.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty far down the line. So gosh, Daniel, the only thing I know to do is us back up and read through. Maybe is there more than one verse about this prince?
Yes. They would say no, but I'm going to say yes because of context. And that's one of the great things, Michael, you taught us about is don't be verse damned.
Yes.
Go back a couple verses and find out where you are. Of course, that prince that's being spoken of is out of Daniel 9:26. But let's go back because that verse was so wonderful to read earlier. Let's read it again in verse 24. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up a vision and a prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So reading verse 1 here, or verse 24, the first verse, we are understanding that we are in this 70-week period, which, again, to emphasize, that's 70 sets of 7. So that is a 490-year period. So that is the time frame. That's where we are. Verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street will be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. And verse 26, and after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it will be a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. So, Michael, in verse 25 is the first time that we see this prince being mentioned, and he's called the Messiah the Prince.
Mm-hmm. And, we read that every way but loose.
Yeah.
I mean, we looked at, should that be, and there are other translations that wipe out even the term Messiah.
Yeah.
And if there's any term in the Hebrew scriptures that the word Messiah is very clear in the Hebrew what it is, it's that. And they absolutely wipe it out to accommodate their doctrine. So our challenge is to set aside every single doctrine, mine, yours, the preterist, the millennial, the post-millennial, because there are influences over this that try to say. Now, while we were just talking, I thought, well, this will be interesting. So I went to my chat GPT and I said, this is the question. Using content only, who is the prince in Daniel 9:24 through 26? I'm going to read you exactly what they said. Now, I asked for content only.
Mm-hmm.
In Daniel 9:24 through 26, the term prince appears twice, referring to, they say, to two distinct figures. And now that just is not true. Because number one, this is why they're saying two distinct figures. So in context, the term Messiah the Prince, this refers to the anointed one, Messiah, understood to be a prophecy about Jesus Christ, who is seen as the one who brings in everlasting righteousness, fulfilling the 6 purposes listed in 9:24. Now listen to what else it said, because it gathers information. The prince who is to come, Daniel 9:26. How is that different people? This figure is associated with the destruction of the city, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary and the temple. Many scholars, see, that's where they went outside what I asked.
Yep.
I didn't ask them what scholars said. I asked them, according to context, who is this?
Yep.
And it said plainly, according to context, this is Jesus Christ, the Messiah. However, this theologian teaches this, and this theologian teaches that, of the 70-day, the prince who is to come. Let's see, who teaches this? Who teaches this second prince? Preterist. Partial preterists believe the prince who is to come refers to Titus, the Roman general or the Roman Empire, as the agent of God's judgment on Jerusalem AD 70. Full preterists extend this interpretation, associating that all prophecy in Daniel and Revelation, including this prince, has been fulfilled in the past.
Specifically 80-70.
Yeah, 80-70 is the ones. The futurist view, the prince refers to the Antichrist. So here's where we get this table leg being built for the Antichrist. So this particular leg is built not only to support the Antichrist, but to also support the view of a future, of the preterist view of this being a part of what has already passed. But they do not identify him as Antichrist.
Mm.
Modern preterist scholars, teachers like R.C. Sproul, Sproul, and Gary DeMar, and others in preterist circles often highlight the historical fulfillment of this prophecy in 70 AD.
Mm.
That prophecy being fulfilled in 70 AD is stated exactly what will be fulfilled in verse 24.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's read verse 24 again about what this prince would bring about the fulfillment of, and let's answer each one of them. Was it fulfilled at the cross, or was it fulfilled in 70 AD when the physical temple was destroyed?
70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. Number 1, to finish the transgression.
All right. Finish transgression. If they would have destroyed the temple, would that have finished the transgression?
No.
Transgression would still, why would transgression still be there? Because law would still be there.
Yeah.
Was law still in place during that 40 years after the cross?
No.
So they were doing nothing when that temple was destroyed. It was destroying an illusion that was left. Where transgression. Take the next one.
To make an end of sin.
To make an end of sin. So they're saying that sin did not end until the fulfillment of this prophecy of 70 AD at the physical destruction of the temple. Now, is there anything about that temple, let's say it had been destroyed and Jesus hadn't died on the cross? Would there have been an end of sin?
No. I mean, we've seen that historically happen because they destroyed the first temple. And guess what? Sin was still there.
Sin was still there after the first destruction. So this is where their argument falls apart completely, because the things they say happened at the destruction of the second temple. Daniel, you just made the perfect analogy. These things did not cease to be during the destruction of the first temple.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next one?
To make a reconciliation for iniquity.
Reconciliation for iniquity. Again, if this did that happen? Was iniquity still there, even though the temple was destroyed the first time?
Mm-hmm.
It was still there.
Still there.
And but was it there when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD?
No, sir.
It was not there. So how could it be a fulfillment of this prophecy in 9, 24, 25, and 26, identifying the prince as being the Messiah? They are the ones who have taken, first off, that would be like saying, all right, we're going to tell you about Babe Ruth, the baseball player. And then go on with the story and say, now, the baseball player did this and this and this. That would be like saying, all right, so we have Babe Ruth, the baseball player, identified here, but we don't know who this baseball player is they're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Ignorance.
Yeah.
That is when, and when does ignorance set in? Ignorance can set in me, and well, I don't think Daniel could be ignorant, but
never.
But ignorance sets in when you have to prove yourself right.
Mm.
And that is just how silly it is to take this term, the prince, who's been identified in the context of 3 verses about the fulfillment of the 70th week of Daniel and turn this prince into somebody else about a whole different time 40 years later. What's the next one?
To bring in everlasting righteousness.
Well, righteousness just did not come through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. It had to wait on the destruction of the temple.
My God, how did that feel coming out of your mouth?
I just had to take a swig of something.
Isn't that disgusting? I mean,
It's just see, and these people are so wonderful. I'm telling you, I know them. I sat in a room with 8 of them years ago. These are wonderful people. One of my friends that I call him my hero. I'm telling you, he's one of the most wonderful people that I know. One of the most wonderful people I respect. But he adheres to this, and so this should be the best example you have of that people that it's not just people that we disagree with totally. We disagree with our preterist friends because they delay the fulfillment of the work of the cross to 70 AD. Some of these people are our friends, close
supporters.
Friends. Yeah, and even support the ministry. We publish many of their things on our page because they have such wonderful things to say, and we're not afraid of their preterist doctrines. So we do publish them. They're on there now. There are preterists who have publications on the Gospel Revolution site, and we're not going to remove them. So if you think that we are being harsh and mean and cruel because we address people's doctrines, these are people we openly let you know we love them. They love us. But I don't know where this doctrine about love has been so distorted into a you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. And I'm sorry, there's nothing about the ministry of Christ, the ministry of Paul, heck, even the ministry of Peter, James, and John never said, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. And that's what love is.
Yeah.
Nobody. So this perverted explanation of what love is, oh, you guys are just so unloving. No, we're being very loving. You're wrong. And the most loving thing you could do for us is to counter that and show us where we are wrong. But you know what? You guys don't have enough love to show us where we're wrong. You do not love us because you will not show us where we are wrong. You won't speak up about it at all. This ministry and the Gospel Revolution is the least addressed, the one that has caused the most hoopla out there is the one that is least addressed by all of these different guys out there. And I don't know why. To me, it says they're chickens. They absolutely. And if you get into a conversation with them in one of these threads, I've tried it several times. And even if you just put it in as a question, they just delete it. We've been blocked by all the mystics. Folks, we address these things because of the truth of the gospel. We are trying to stop history from repeating itself. Now, you may think that's going to be resolved in politics. I do not believe it's going to be resolved in politics. We've had politics as far right as right can be to outside the boundaries of right. We've had politics to the left as far as left could be to outside the boundaries of left. And that's right here in the good old USA. If you think that the switching of these of who's in charge is going to change our history that has developed from the past till now, it's not going to change, folks. I don't care how far right, how far left, how much down the middle we go. And some of you have poured millions of dollars into both sides. And I can tell you in the long run, it's not going to change anything. It swings to the right and it swings to the left. And people are all the time wanting me to take a political stand. And they think it's just because I don't know what they think. But the fact of it is that I see argument on all sides that is credible. And I consider it. Now, where I eventually wind up, folks, I'm cursed with thinking about things. And I love to think them through. I'm not going to get angry and upset with people that would disagree with it, but I don't engage in it because I know people can't. They just can't do it. Because if you bring up yes, but what about this? That's a disagreement.
Mm.
And you're over here. And even though that discussion itself may not end up in one, but you wouldn't believe how many times, because of a simple discussion about a single issue, that those persons have called up people, and it's probably cost us support, and said, that Mike, he's a far right winger. And then somebody else have a conversation with me about another particular part of an issue, and they call up, Mike, that Mike Williams, he's a lefty. And you want to know something? You're all wrong. And what part am I agreeing with you, and what part am I disagreeing with you? For the sake of the gospel, I refuse to answer. We have one thing, folks, that we're trying to do here. And I'm telling you, the Republicans cannot solve it, and the Democrats cannot solve it. What we are sharing with you, only the gospel can do. And now, if my view of politics remains in effect, that has worked now for all of my adult life, if the party and the group that you agree with is not in power, just wait a little while, they will be. But see, everybody thinks that this is going to go one way and everything's going to change forever. Well, I can't say that that's not going to happen, but so far in our 300-year history, it has not happened. We swing from the right to the left, and the left to the right, to the right to the left. And somewhere seems like that somewhere while we're staggering around in the middle of the road, some things get done. It's more upset about politics than any time on that. and Daniel is wiser than I because he's kept his mouth shut.
The last two, Michael, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Did these happen at the destruction of was Jesus anointed most holy when the physical temple was destroyed?
No. Jesus was anointed most holy. So where is this other prince in chapter 9:24?
He's not there.
So why are they taking? You see, you cannot deny that the one verse says the Messiah, the prince, and then take the liberty to say that when it brings up prince in the very next verse, it means somebody else altogether different.
I think I see two reasons, Michael. One of which is a point that you have been driving home on, is understanding who the temple is.
Exactly.
Because the 80-70 is all built around this physical temple.
Yeah.
And we have to understand, number one, the time frame. And number two, what Jesus taught us. He told us who the temple is.
Yeah.
He said he is the temple. And if you are looking for the destruction of the temple, the rebuilding of some temple, some physical temple, then you're going to miss this every single time.
Yeah.
Because even though there was a temple, even though that temple did get destroyed in AD 70, even though those are historical facts, that's the illusion. That's the illusion that was set up. That was the distraction that was set up. That was set up. I mean, Hebrews says it showed us that this was the way into the most holy, but that way wasn't yet manifest until the Christ showed up on the scene.
Yeah, and after it's manifest, how does this other building fulfill any prophecy?
Yeah.
And I see, my goodness, I see if it helped people to step back from any futuristic prophecy. Oh, did it give them peace? I'm glad for you.
Yeah.
But folks, after I discovered the gospel, how many times I've had to revamp what it was I actually saw in clarity, because I'm information's coming at us endlessly. And we will continue to look at this. So what we have found is now 4 legs of an 8-legged table, that these legs were designed to give a character and a personage and an individuality to a term called Antichrist, that the one who taught about it never said it was a single person.
Yeah. Michael, again, where do they get the future from is because, the King James Version says that this prince is to come.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this prophecy came 490 years before the prince came.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course it's going to be futuristic, but we kept it futuristic even after it was fulfilled.
And they'll stand and look at you. You read that. It says the prince that is to come. It's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
That is choosing to be ignorant. Now, the term ignorant comes from the term ignore. They are choosing to ignore the facts to support their position.
Yeah.
And again, these are wonderful people. These are not bad people. So just stop accusing us of putting people down and all of this. And yeah, for sometimes we joke and make up little names and stuff. But shoot, I do that to my grandson.
Yeah.
This is just an attempt to put a divisive definition on what we were instructed to do by Jesus and by Paul, and that is to search the scriptures. Paul said it is a damn shame that you cannot discern whether a teaching is true or not. Well, I put a little inflection in there that Paul probably didn't use. In fact, he probably used more than that. But this term Antichrist, it's just, God, if we don't see this, we are doomed to repeat. I got on my news feed this morning, and I don't dare answer questions on there. Believe me, when it comes up and says, "Do you think this is right or that's wrong? Do you think this person's win? Who do you think's?" I never answer a question, because I know the algorithms are going to throw me into a group that I'm going to hear nothing but that side from. So if you've answered a question and you wonder why you get nothing but that, it's because you volunteered for that. That's just the way it runs. I don't answer these quizzes. I don't answer them. I had one come up the other day that said, if you can read this, you are a super genius. And it's one of those that only the first and last letters are the word. And I can read right through it. I mean, I seem to read better when it's spelled incorrectly and just the first. I'm telling you, I can read better that way. And I wanted so much to click on there. Yes. And then there was the list that came up of 34 places of that you have been. And I've been to all 34 places.
Mm.
And it made me stop and realize, my gosh, I've been such a fortunate person. And there was nobody on there that had all 34 places that they had visited. Some it was low as 2 and 3, and it's like, where in God's name do you live?
Mm.
And one had 32, and I wanted so much to put in there. I've been to all 34, but I know better than to answer any of those questions. I just don't do it. So now, whether that's working or not and keeping me more of a neutral zone, I don't know. I just don't answer questions. Now, I will answer any question that you have, but I'm not answering a question that Facebook has. I'm just not going to do it.
Well, Michael, to me, this question has been answered. Who is this prince? I think it's very clear based on the timeline, based on the context. I mean, how can you take a prince in verse 25 and say it's not the same prince in verse 26?
That it's just astounding to me that someone would even attempt to do that. But boy, do we have a list of people, and the ones who look at this one the strongest are our preterist friends. I think that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. And, again, I think another side of that, too, is you have the temple issue, is they're looking at the wrong temple. And the other side of it is people just cannot accept that Jesus, to have a label of the man of sin or the abomination of desolation, to associate that with Jesus, it just sends chills down people's spine. But you have to understand that all of this judgment was committed into his hands.
Yeah.
And by fulfilling that, he actually saved the world from this 3.5 years of tribulation.
Oh.
And because he was this prince, he ended the war. Because he was this prince, this flood of a great tribulation didn't come. Because he was this prince, the desolation of the world didn't take place. The desolation that did take place was the desolation of sin and transgression and iniquity. And he established everlasting righteousness, not in 80, 70, not 40 years after he raised from the dead, but in his death, burial, and resurrection, he completed all of these things.
Well, Paul made it clear, had the princes of this world known who he was and what the result of his work would be, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory.
Yeah.
So they knew who he was. And since that time, it's hard for people when the prophecy says that Jesus came to destroy sin and they still see evil. That's I know the big hang up. But the power of the gospel is not that good and evil are gone. We actually have the power to deal with good and evil now. We just don't know who we are. So we still can't deal with it. We don't know where we are. So one of the most powerful things that can happen to the human race is to stop calling good and evil sin, because it's not.
Yeah.
What Jesus destroyed was not the knowledge of good and evil. Why would he not destroy the knowledge of good and evil? Because God had it before he ever created man. He'd be destroying a part of God himself. Jesus didn't come here to destroy God. He came here to destroy the works of the devil. And what the works of the devil did is turn the knowledge of good and evil into sin. And Jesus took the sin out of the knowledge of good and evil.
Did you hear that? I think our table fell over. Four or five legs are gone, Michael.
Yeah. And folks, we're not taking, right hand on red, left hand on yellow. All we did is read the 3 verses where all of this comes from.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
And you show me, and even ChatGPT acknowledged that when I asked ChatGPT, restrict your answer to the context. Oh, this is Messiah. And did you notice that when it brought in, oh, but there's a third person according to?
Yeah. Yep.
But artificial intelligence knows that there's only one mentioned, and that's the Messiah.
And so it is, we must leave you, family and friends. If you'd like to know anything about the Gospel Revolution, then call our office on
832-318-9339.
and speak to us about how you want to participate, or go to www.gospelrevolution.com and hit the connect link. You can find us on your favorite social media network, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Please be sure to hit that subscribe, share, and like button on whatever platform you are listening. Now it's good night, and it truly is good night from Daniel Rouse in the truly frozen tundra.
Yes, and folks, this is we still have open our pledge drive. We've not come anywhere near what we need the response. We've had some really wonderful people. We've had less than 10 people respond to this pledge drive. And but gratefully they have responded generously, but of course no possible way that they could get us to where we need to be to get us out of this struggle. And I've got hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands of people around the world that credit this ministry with absolutely not just changing their lives, but giving them a life. And how you keep your wallets closed when we ask you for help, I don't even know how you do that. We're not trying to condemn you. We're not trying to make you feel guilty, but I don't see how you can feel good about knowing that the thing that you heard that has given you the life that you have, and you not respond to the need that we have financially. Maybe it's just me, but I certainly have responded to this gospel and invest my own funds into it. So if you guys can, please help us. It's a very difficult thing for me to make phone calls to ask people for money. So help.
Yeah, so give Mike a call, or you can go to gospelrevolution.com, hit the donate button, and on that donate page, you can see our mailing address if you just want to avoid the phone call altogether and send it in.
Yeah. But just leave the amount blank.
Hazel knows how to take care of it.
Signed checks is all we need.
We sure hope that you enjoyed today's Powercast. And remember, we'll be here to do the same thing all over again next week, only...
well, better and better and better. I'm willing to double down this time on better. Get used to this, folks, because I just did a little bit of research, and I sent Daniel a list of subjects and topics that we cannot. There's no place in the foreseeable future we're going to be outside of teaching on the 1,000-year reign.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware off the wild love's been knocking from within. You are the love you seek, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, and these words be the cause that guides you right home. We are one, we are love, we are. Know where you gotta be, nothing to complete. It's not a thing that you need, you're the love. Just remember to breathe and take a second off. Look, I'm just trying to remind you that you're perfectly divine, flawlessly designed. lost and alone, staring at the unknown. Let these words be the compass that guides us back home. We are one, we are love, we are one. Yeah, we are love.
Deconstructing religion and barbecuing the sacred cows of Christianity before your very eyes. You are listening to
The Gospel Revolution.